You have you have a new stream link, right? Not the old one. Oh, Shivam is here. Shivam, mute up.
हाँ मैं कह रहा हूँ हम बात कर सकते हैं क्या अभी बोल सकते हैं क्या
हाँ, I guess like start.
अच्छा
Yo, Shiva.
हाय हिमांशु
Okay.
Your audio. Try to try to speak actually. Uh,
Hello. Hello. Check. One, two,
Shivam, can you
three.
speak?
try to speak actually.
Hey, Parth, can you hear me
Okay, okay,
via
good.
the... Okay. Can you try muting Google Meet so that the voice is not coming from Meet and YouTube?
Yeah, yeah, it's working, it's working. Chill.
No. Good, good.
Everything is working right.
Let's... Parth, you have to mute because
हाँ हाँ
we
आ
are
रहा है
hearing us.
Okay,
Okay. Okay.
no
Cool.
problem.
Cool.
No, it's working on that.
Nice. Great.
अरे पार्थ तुम स्पेस स्टेशन पे क्या कर रहे हो
अरे,
So let's begin then. For people who were here before, sorry that you'll hear a lot of repetitive stuff, but for Shivam, this will be new.
ये
So, hello everyone, my name is Simanshu. Today I'm going to talk about open source then and now. I'm glad this is happening. This is less of a talk, more of a sharing of a story, but this story is not my personal story. We have a character. So everyone, meet Arko Punter. His pronouns are he and him. He spent 5 years in college, full of young and bright minds like us. Wow, like you, sorry. And he fell in love with open source then. Now he does a 9 to 5 software engineering job and still loves open source now. So let's take a look at Arco Punter then. And some of you may find these bits relatable, some of you may not. So Argo Punter then would spend his mid-sems and end-sems time to think about new project ideas. Can we create a new CLI? Can we create a new library that people can use? Can we collaborate on something? What about this MetaHP project? Can we start this now? Um, of course, all those projects would be open source. He would favor Google Summer of Code and such collaborative competitions. Sorry, such collaborative events over some competitions where you're competing with your friends. He would think that working on a project which is used by thousands, maybe not hundreds of thousands of people, is more meaningful than competing with my friends on Kaggle, for example. And he would get really upset if someone asks him to create something that's going to remain closed source. So a senior will come and say, "Hey, let's work on this project. Can you create an app?" And he'll ask, "Can we make this open source?" And the senior will say, "No, we cannot." And then he will get really, really upset. Sports programming was always a big no-no for Orko Punter. He doesn't like the idea of spending 12 hours on one problem, writing undocumented C++ that he would never be able to understand 1 month from that time, not let alone any other human being. We're all in this together, he would say. He would build relationships with a lot of people with similar interests. He would share his learnings rather than adding them as a plus one to his personal stack that he would be able to use in interviews and competitions. Um, and he would spend a lot of time on thinking and wondering whether his code looks good or not, whether it's pleasant to read, even at the cost of extra 10 milliseconds compile time. But the most importantly, he knew that this will get over soon, that he will graduate one day, and then all these dreams come crashing down. And he used to wonder if he could get paid to do open source full time. But he knew that the real world cares more about whether you can traverse a tree on CoderPad, upside down, downside up, sideways, something he will never do in his coming 30, 40 years of a career. So that was about Arcopunter then. But in his pre-final internship, he got a glimpse of open source from a company's perspective. Let's call it a bird company. He helped the bird company engineers produce more open source software. He created tools that they can use to do that. And then all his tools then ended up as open source for other companies to use them. He learned about what an OSPO is, also known as Open Source Program Office. So that was his pre-final internship. Maybe my dream will come true. Maybe I can do open source as a full-time job. Nope, not going to happen. He traverses a tree on CoderPad one day, and then he joins a company, writes a lot of closed source code at a company for one whole year. So yeah, now let's take a look at Arco Punter now as of this very moment. He's an open source maintainer of a project with rising community of developers, around 200 within 8 months. He creates a lot of good first issues for people to pick them up. For Arcopunter then to comment, can I work on this? And Arcopunter now replies with how can you work on this? So that was a bit of a story. Now we can ask, why do companies produce open source software? Some companies like Bird Company, and then we didn't name the other ones. But before I answer this, I want to say another quick story. It's called the Kubernetes story. So I hope all of you have heard of Kubernetes. It's something that's turning developers into writing YAML for full-time job. That's another thing. What happened was in maybe 2014 or 16, Google open sourced this project, and then so before open sourcing Kubernetes, Google realized that we're not able to deploy these thousands and thousands of services internally, and we need some kind of tool to make them scale on demand. Um, all the other features Kubernetes provides, and they created something for their complexity. And in 2016, they open sourced it for other companies to use it. If you remember, Google also has a cloud platform, GCP, and Amazon has another cloud platform, AWS, and they are the two main competitors in the industry if you want to use cloud. GCP started late. AWS has been around for a very long time, and to give AWS a competition, GCP needed something. So by open sourcing Kubernetes, Google set a standard that if you really want to easily scale up your services, uh, solve your complexity problem, start using Kubernetes. And they did. Companies started using Kubernetes as a first grade citizen when it comes to their infrastructure. And neither Google, neither AWS provided a default support for Kubernetes. You had to understand how Kubernetes works for you to deploy it in your servers and configure the load balancing, configure the DNS, so many things. So GCP introduced something, they called it GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine, or I might be wrong, which had native support for Kubernetes. And if you wanted to deploy your services using Kubernetes, you can just do it in a few clicks. And that led to a migration. People started migrating off AWS because AWS had no support for Kubernetes. And when they added support for Kubernetes AWS, they did not had that much experience because all the Kubernetes engineers were at Google, and they could help GCP build a better infrastructure. And starting from an open source software, setting the standard, attracting thousands of engineers to contribute to it, Google won the race, and they made millions of dollars literally, just because they had better support. So that's the Kubernetes story. That's one of many other stories out there. So why do companies want to produce open source software? You may ask. Um, Many reasons. The one that I just mentioned is termed as industry leadership. That's a strategy of companies that are growing large. So I'll tell you another story, because I'm telling stories today. You might know that Netflix and Spotify and all these companies that work in browser and deal with copyrighted content need to make sure that the users are not able to download that content very easily for privacy reasons. So what does Netflix do? What does Spotify do? That if I play something, why can't I download it? So they introduced a new technology called DRM, Digital Rights Management. And to implement DRM in all browsers over the internet, you need to have reach in the community, in the actual World Wide Web Consortium community, so that it gets approved. And Netflix and all these companies who want DRM will have their engineers or representatives in that consortium so that they can vote for this feature. If you don't have your people there, you will never get this approved, and your product will never succeed. So that's called industry leadership. You want your people to be there in those groups in CNCF, for example, which is the parent organization of Kubernetes and all these cloud softwares, so that your benefits are approved easily. So that's called setting standards, leading the industry, and it's a big race, if I may. But there are also some good things that come out of it. If you are setting the standards, you're building relationships. So a lot of these softwares are created in partnership with multiple corporations. Google would open source this software, and Amazon wants to use it. They will collaborate on this, ultimately for their business profit. You might have seen recently that AWS started supporting macOS instances. This was a week ago. And well, what's the benefit here? Apple gets its computer shipped. AWS gets more of its users because people want to test some applications not on Linux EC2 instances, but on macOS EC2 instances. So there are lots of partnerships. Why do companies produce open source software? To hire more archopenters, people who really hate working on closed source software. So they want to join these companies. They would specifically pick out these companies. Another reason, software gets outdated really, really fast. And even closed source of software gets outdated really fast. Quark is one example. When we started, we wrote a software, we wrote some Python server, and it's gone. The product remains, but the Flask server is gone because it was not well maintained in open source. And that's what Praneeth, Ayush, and Himanshu, and these people were trying to do was to set a standard for co-op that other companies would use and collaborate so that the software remains for a longer time. But we didn't do that, and the software died. It's the same. When Orko Bunter was working 1 year at this closed source company, he found out that there are softwares that were created 5 years ago, and the industry has moved on, and they never. If they had used the open source counterpart of it, it would have been still in value. It would still be at the current features that the industry supports. But they thought, nah, let's create our own let's create our own SQL alchemy, and then it's unmaintained now. And then people are stuck with legacy software. So if you make your software open source, that's a very good way to creating a healthier, sustainable software. I have few other reasons, so I'll quickly go through them. Suggestions about architecture. You might wonder that if a team in Google is creating something like Google Meet, all the Google engineers would gather in a conference and then they would talk about how we should work on video streaming. It doesn't happen this way. So very few people, maybe 50 engineers or 100 engineers, work on the architecture and then they thoroughly review it. That's it. That's the extent of how big of a collaboration or architecture gets. If you, and that's a Google Meet is a big software. It's not every other software is like Google Meet. So if you're creating a software, you usually get 4 people to review the architecture. Make it open source. You and tell you that you're doing this thing wrong. Then there's this use. You get reviews for free, and not. And there are many archipenters out there, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands archipenters to contribute to your software. Just make them open source. They will come, and is where OSPO comes into a picture. So every company sets up these OSPOs, these groups that coordinates with legal, that coordinates with marketing, that coordinates with engineering, HR, and overall the upper management, so that your company has a strategy. Your company should uh, set in stone why you do open source and should have it in the mind of everyone rather than just a few people trying to create that motivation, create that environment. So in OSPO, GSOC, as we know, Google Stone of Code is a product of a very successful OSPO, and that's Google. So I have a interview that I watched from Chris DiBona. If you Google Chris DiBona interview, that's the first thing that pops up. So he joined Google, and he's the director of Google. He's the director of Google Open Source. So back in the day, 2006 maybe or 2004, um, Larry Page and Sergey Brin asked him, "Hey, you know what? These students, these computer science students, they're all good doing courses in their colleges, but during the summer they kind of lag behind the industry. They are sitting idle. They are not doing anything. Can we do something for them?" And then Chris DiBona came up with this idea that maybe we can do some kind of remote internship. And then he emailed that they had it, this program, and it's a success. So many people have, so let me rephrase. So many archipenters have been motivated towards open source because of GSOC, and it's a big thing now in our community. And do is to create these 3 core authors of Golang. Google's embrace of open source has been important to me as an engineer in ways I cannot express. It's fantastic. And if I sit and reflect on what this means for the industry, for everyone, to create a programming language that is now becoming the standard of any backend service is a big thing. And to do that within a decade is mind blowing. And how do you accomplish this? Can And if I say that without doing it open source, without getting those thousands of contributors, no, it's not possible. A company cannot hire thousands of engineers working on one project. You have to you have to have some kind of strategy, and that's a brilliant thing that's happening right now. Is how do you make softwares have this much impact? So endnotes, that's all from me. Companies have started building OSPOs. Not every OSPO is like Google, just like not every company is like Google. So they have one or two people working full time, working on these strategies, helping engineers produce open source, and that will help their dozens of benefits that open source gives to a company. So we will see more of this in future. That was all.
Who's going next?
I guess it was Path.
Acha, okay. Um, just give me a minute. I'll just shut my door. Oh, yeah, okay. Uh, Shivam, you're muted. Hold it.
आदित्य ये बैकग्राउंड कहाँ से मिला तुम्हें? तुमने खुद बनाया है?
नहीं अभी बहुत पहले मिला था एक ऑनलाइन
अच्छा।
रेडिट पे, बहुत मस्त है।
हाँ काफी पार्थ और राघवेंद्र दोनों साथ में बैठे हो क्या स्पेस स्टेशन पे?
Okay, shall I start? Okay. Just a minute. Present. Is it visible? Hello.
Yep, it's visible.
Yeah, okay. My name is Parth, and I'll be talking a little bit about C Python, which I've been exploring recently. And I'm sure like other some people here who know a lot more than me. So hopefully this will be a discussion. I'm really looking forward to it. Um, basically the motivation for exploring C Python is about what happens when I run Python and some .py error, what happens when I run Python in interactive mode. So I was thinking about all this, and I started exploring C Python, which is like a C implementation of the Python language. Um, what will you get from all of this? It gets converted to machine code.